Hi, welcome to the Liberty Pirate. Do you look at this great nation and wonder what the hell is going on? It wasn't that long ago our country embraced a centrist philosophy, either leaning slightly left or right. It was a country that recognized our differences and worked to compromise, not divide. Today, most Americans are bombarded by the fringe efforts of either party that now solidify their bases. A hard line has been drawn in the sand to isolate the conservative and liberal platforms, even ostracizing the more moderate members of their respective parties. Common sense has given way to the partisan pulpit, and reason is sidelined in favor of a biased narrative. The hijacking of American ideology is a burden both Republican and Democrat parties bear. They both hold hostage the true intent of American liberty and favor for a vision of their America. President George Washington, in his farewell address, warned of political parties, saying, "However, factions may now and then answer popular ends. They are likely, in the course of time and things, to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion." Whereas the truth of American liberty lies within the individual. There are approximately 334 million people in America today, which means there are 334 million interpretations of freedom, 334 million perceptions of individual liberty, and 334 million paths in pursuit of happiness. Liberty itself has taken a backseat to political platforms. The Republican Party distorts a narrative of being morally superior and fiscally prudent. The Democratic Party feigns humanitarianism and social inclusion. And with conviction of steadfast righteousness, both parties are willing to oppress the freedoms and liberties we so cherish in effort to establish a concept of America they deem correct. They have been so successful in vilifying each other that the fabric, once woven together by the threads of diversity, are being torn apart with unpatriotic disregard. Groups of American people are deemed enemies based on the color of their political party. Dissenters have been dehumanized and considered inferior. The principles of each platform remain inconsistent, and only when it's prudent to their impassioned and temporary position of the day do they entrench themselves into a battle of virtue, ignoring the right of individualism, painting with a broad stroke a perception they believe should be imposed on all, and neglecting to adhere to the promise of liberty. Not every card-carrying party member holds to the dire nature of their faction's wavering principles. It's not you, the conservative, or you, the progressive, that is to blame for the separation of American unity and cohesiveness. It is your right to live your life in according to the principles you deem pragmatic. It is not, however, anyone's right to dictate the principles in which others should abide. The error of this nation is the shift from a concerted effort to protect American liberty, regardless of political concepts, in favor of loyalty to a party and its arrogant attempt to shape America in its image. The fringes of these parties have been shown with historical deluge the dangers of socialism and theocracy. We must recognize that our perception of freedom is not an all-inclusive established precedent that is recognized by some and either unknown or ignored by others. Thomas Jefferson once said, "Rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will, within limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others." Liberty is freedom from arbitrary and unreasonable restraint upon an individual. The Republican and Democrat duopoly has infringed upon our individual rights for far too long. They mask their tenets in the costumes of integrity in an attempt to further indoctrinate its followers, who are already conditioned to accept perspective information and reject opposing consideration. We, the people, need to learn to refuse that coercion by the duopoly and understand that a way of life sculpted by a certain party does not encapsulate American values. Those liberties once championed by the likes of Thomas Paine, Susan B. Anthony, and Martin Luther King Jr. are benchmarks for equality under the protection of individual independence. The Republican or Democrat Party cannot guarantee those protections when ushering in their platforms. No matter the virtuous intent of their narratives, the oppression of individuals' liberty will be collateral. We must not be afraid of opposing viewpoints, and we must not be threatened by another's way of life. We need to reconsider the significance of control by removing that control from the duopoly, taking control of ourselves and relinquishing the control of others. No one knows better how to live their lives than each single person. Only we have the innate ability to recognize what is best for us, and only we can appreciate that pursuit of happiness. Though the Libertarian Party, like all others, has its political flaws, it does keep the sanctity of personal liberty true to its core. It relinquishes the incendiary tactic of disparaging the sacredness of one's beliefs in favor of another. In order to maintain the weight of essential liberties, we must accept the inherent differences in us all. Empathy, sympathy, and altruism are crucial characteristics in order to truly nurture those seeds of liberty. We need to reestablish the kaleidoscope of freedom by embracing our right to be different and celebrate dissension in order to make a more perfect union. If you are a Republican or a Democrat, ask yourself, are my party's talking points more important than personal freedom? Is authoritarian control justified in any capacity just because you agree with your tribal institutions? Our political concept needs to change. It must. We cannot treat the political landscape as a choice between two entities. Whether it be any of the other viable options, we can no longer be handcuffed to a red or blue narrative. We cannot ignore either party weaponizing the government and oppressing those they disagree with. And there is no doubt some of you may have been swayed to think that the version of liberty described by one of those two parties is the more correct, more true, and more profound version, akin to the intention established at the birth of our nation. But we forget that our founding fathers and mothers were radicals of their times. The duopoly has perverted that narrative. They recognize their significance in establishing a revolutionary notion that we the people shall govern ourselves, and we the people shall bask in an environment that encourages the right to liberty in whatever happiness we pursue. Our country, as resilient as it is, has lost its way. Many have been convinced that the version of freedom they deem appropriate be applied to everyone. Instead of liberty for all, the mantra of liberty for me, but not for thee has resonated. But despite the turbulent surface in a sea of political struggle, the depths of this nation hold steady. We the people need to reaffirm our dedication to individual liberty, the right to self-governance, bodily autonomy, and the protection of one's right to opinion and preference. The unique nature of humanity precludes us from establishing a comprehensive government. We cannot look at issues as black or white, or even red or blue, but we recognize the full spectrum that encompasses any given topic. There is a way to replenish the intention of American liberty, but you must be willing to step aside from the assembly line of antiquated political propaganda. You must allow yourself to be wrong at times, and recognize that ethics, morals, and standards that have been ingrained in you are a product of repetition, inclusion, and comfortability. Under the protections of equal rights, American liberty is extended to 330 million versions, each one unique, each one different, but no one more important than the other. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that, hit the like, share, and subscribe button for future content. If you want to leave a comment, go ahead and throw it down below. Let me know what you want to talk about in the future. And trust and believe, after 20 years in the military, I appreciate both love and hate equally. So don't hold back. I'll talk to y'all later.